Welcome to the Conservative Parlor with VJ Willis.
Today's guest is the third of four generations of military servicemen and his family. During his 22-year career in the United States Army, he served in several combat zones and received many honors, including a Bronze Star, 3 Meritorious Service Medals, 3 Army Commendation Medals, 1 with Valor Device, and a Valorous Unit Award in 1993. He was named the U.S. Army ROTC Instructor of the Year. In November of 2010, he was elected to the United States Congress, representing Florida's 22nd District. As a member of the 112th Congress, he sat on the Small Business and Armed Services Committees and was instrumental in passage of the 2011 and 2012 National Defense Authorization Acts. He is the former executive director of the National Center for Policy Analysis in Dallas, Texas, and a former director of the Booker T. Washington Initiative for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. In July of 2020, he was elected chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. I have personally seen and heard him at 2 Republican Party functions. Some backroom talk has labeled him as a Johnny-come-lately, but I would remind folks that Sam Houston came late to Texas. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Allen West from the Republican Party of Texas to the Conservative Parlor. Thank you very much for coming, Colonel West.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And by the way, why would you prefer that we refer to you as Colonel West, or would you rather be Mr. West? Or
well, Mr. West is my dad. I'm just his son, Alan.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to remember that. I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy, so it's hard for me to do that. So our first question is, conservative voters in America oppose abortions regardless of what terms they would be performed. Liberals are rushing through legislation that violates the right to life of unborn infants. What ways do you believe the states can protect their states' rights to determine this issue for themselves? And do you believe state laws would stand up to the challenge in the federal courts?
I think that it's very important that states understand, when you refer back to the 10th Amendment, that all of those powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved down to the states and to the people. And I think that's an important decision that we have to look at. Roe v. Wade is not a law. It was a Supreme Court decision. It did not go through a legislative process. And so I think that we need to pass laws in our respective states that could stand up against a judicial decision. 7 or 8 people cannot make a law. And when you look at the Constitution, the Article 3, the judicial branch is supposed to interpret law, not make law. And the very first inalienable right that you have endowed to you by our Creator God is life. And that means all life. That means born and unborn life. And when we look at what is happening in our country and here in the state of Texas, even, this murdering of our unborn children by some of the most heinous methods, I think that it does not speak to the better angels of who we are. So I believe that right now, when you look at the fact that we understand technology, we understand that a heartbeat starts at 18 days, I believe that this is a winning issue for us on the side of those who believe in preserving life.
Thank you. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms, yet the Democratic Party is forcing through radical laws that will significantly undermine those rights. First, do you feel that the federal courts will uphold our Second Amendment rights? If not, how would you propose we should take the teeth out of these laws?
Well, first and foremost, it's already been decided. The Heller decision, Heller versus DC, was a decision from the Supreme Court that said the Second Amendment does apply. It is federal law. It stands up. And then McDonald versus the city of Chicago also sustained the Second Amendment with states and local municipalities. So it's been decided. This is part of our Bill of Rights. The very second thing in the Bill of Rights is the Second Amendment. And what I see happening, we just saw recently that President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris They're not doing this again by law. They're doing it by executive orders. You cannot undermine a constitutional right by an executive order. The last time someone tried to do that, I think it was a guy by the name of King George III. It didn't end up very well. And as a matter of fact, the United States of America started its march toward independence on April the 19th of 1775 because the British were marching inland to destroy a weapons and armaments factory in Concord, Massachusetts. So our founding fathers, those patriots that stood there on Lexington Green, understood that as long as you are an armed individual, you're a citizen. The minute that you become an unarmed individual, you're a subject. And so what we see happening with these red flag laws and things of this nature, those are unconstitutional. They violate your Second Amendment. They violate your Fourth Amendment rights. And right now, there is a case before the Supreme Court as to whether or not law enforcement can come into your home without a warrant and seize your legal lawfully gained firearms. And that should not be happening. That should not even be a case that's going before the Supreme Court. But yet we saw President Biden talk about a national red flag law, which is unconstitutional. So again, I think that as long as we stand on what is right and correct by our rule of law, by our understanding of the Bill of Rights and our constitutionality, the 10th Amendment, we're on the right side. We just have to have the courage to stand for life, the courage to stand up for our Second Amendment.
Agreed. Election integrity is a primary concern for conservatives. Republican election observers were bullied, harassed, and denied proper access to vote counting centers. What future action should be taken to force proper monitoring?
Well, first and foremost, let's get this clear. You know, if you didn't notice, I'm a Black man. I was born in Georgia in 1961 in a Blacks only hospital. I believe that we have to have election integrity. So I'm waiting to hear someone call me a white supremacist and a racist because I believe in election integrity. And so those are some of the things we have to do to protect the honest, fair, and free elections of the United States of America, or else we become a third world junta of a country, a banana republic. And so when you look at election integrity, again, this is something that is part of those powers reserved to the states and to the people. Elections are done at the state level. That's why you have state election law. And that's why our legislatures need to pass very strong election law. You saw that happen in Georgia. What, of course, is the response for the left, Jim Crow 2.0, but it was the Democrats that started Jim Crow as a policy and they implemented it, not Republicans. So they should know about that. And when you talk about voter fraud, when you talk about voter irregularities, unconstitutional actions, those are all the things that happened in the 2020 election. Governors cannot make or change election law. Secretaries of state cannot do that. Courts cannot do that. The only people that can change or amend election law is a legislature. That's the legislative branch. That's what they're supposed to do. So we have got to get that back under control. And when you read HR 1, the federal government has no enumerated power to say anything or dictate to any of the states about elections, to say that there is going to be national, universal mail-in ballots, or that there will not be any voter ID anywhere when it comes to voting, or there will not be any review of voter registration rolls. That's outside of the purview and scope of the federal government. And furthermore, where can you go in the United States of America and not have a picture ID? And it was very interesting that you had American Airlines and Delta Airlines CEOs coming out and saying that they were against the Georgia election law. Well, I have to show an ID to get onto an airplane. Or the Major League Baseball saying that the Georgia election laws were, in violation of individual rights. If you go to pick up will call tickets at a Major League Baseball game, you have to show picture ID. So I guess we're all racist if that's the basis that we're going to look at, whether or not you have to show a picture ID. But again, it comes back to the states. It comes back to our elected legislatures here in Texas, Georgia, all of these states that are controlled by Republican legislatures to protect our election integrity.
Thank you. Not all states use the Dominion voting system, yet they all use other computer-based systems. Are those secure? And what can be done about the Dominion voting systems?
Well, it's very interesting that one of the largest states in the United States of America, Texas, rejected the Dominion voting system. We should not have our voting systems that are linked into the internet because we know they can be hacked and they can be manipulated. So one of the key things we have to have, if you're going to have a computerized voting system, you got to make sure it's not linked into the internet. And you also make sure that it has a paper auditable trail. Those are two things that are so important. And here in Texas, that's what they're looking at, is making sure we have a paper trail, an audible trail for these computer systems. But again, I think that we need to have some level of understanding that, you can't dictate to our states, or definitely down to the county level, which is where elections are executed. But we got to make sure that we don't have systems that are corrupted. We don't need to have servers that are located in any foreign country or things of this nature.
So you believe that the paper trail that you're discussing will counteract any sort of monkey business with the computer systems themselves?
Yeah, I do believe that you have to have that because you have to have an auditable, ability to go back and track these things. And right now we don't have that. We just have, these computer systems, which again were linked into the internet, and many of them are vulnerable to being hacked.
Okay. Big tech companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, and others have openly interfered with the 2020 election and our First Amendment right of free speech. What changes to existing federal laws do you feel would address this?
Well, first and foremost, they should have taken away the Section 230 protections for those big tech companies because they're starting to cross over a line. They're not an open public platform. They are, without a doubt, ideologically driven. And when you look at what they are doing in our respective states, you've seen some states pass censorship legislation that says, individual citizens will be able to file lawsuits in the respective states if they find themselves being censored. But I think another thing we need to do, a lot of these corporations and companies, Google, Oracle, they're looking to reposition themselves, relocate into conservative states like we see here in Texas. We should not be giving them taxpayer funded benefits or sweeteners, as we call it, so to entice them to move into these conservative red states. Now, the other thing that needs to happen, and what we're looking at in Texas, and hopefully it does pass, is that when you have people like Mark Zuckerberg, who is writing big time checks that go directly to county election offices for quote unquote get out the vote efforts. Also, to include here in Webb County, which is down in Laredo, Mark Zuckerberg has gone down there and bought the voting machines for Webb County. We should not allow that to happen. And that's something that hopefully the election integrity legislation that'll be passed here in Texas will preclude that from happening again.
What provisions should be granted to new social media platforms to allow them to fairly compete with the current platforms?
Well, I think without a doubt, there are some antitrust issues that we have here. When you look at how Parlor was attacked and assailed by Amazon and some of the other big tech corporations and driven out because they're a conservative platform, we've got to make sure that we have all speech being protected and not being pushed out by these larger ideologically driven leftist platforms. And so I think that's very important that we have a free and fair and open free market system, but we cannot have these monopolies that I think you see happening with Facebook, Twitter, and some of the others.
In your December 14th, 2020 interview with Glenn Beck, you discussed forming a quote union of states that will abide by the Constitution. Would you expound on those comments and tell us if you still feel this is a viable option?
It is a viable option. As a matter of fact, I just took the first sentence of the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America, where it said, "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union." And what's the very first thing? Establish justice. And so you already see that happening. Many states' attorney generals are starting to work together and push back against the Biden administration, some of these executive orders. You see a lot of our conservative states coming together. Iowa just recently did it, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Dakota, others passing, constitutional nullification and also passing constitutional carry legislation. So there's nothing wrong with these strong conservative states coming together, because I remember when the blue states were coming together and they formed a national popular vote interstate compact. Nobody talked about them and nobody said that they were trying to undermine our constitutional republic, when actually that's what they're trying to do, is undermine the electoral college. So I think it's very important that law-abiding, constitutionally driven states stand up and make sure that there is equal protection under the law, because we cannot have states that are doing unconstitutional actions like we saw in the November 2020 elections that have consequences and ramifications for the states that did follow the Constitution in the November 2020 election, but yet they have no voice. They have nobody to go and petition for redress of grievance against these states doing unconstitutional things.
What is your stand on the bill introduced to the Texas House, House Bill 1359, calling for a referendum vote by the voters of Texas to consider separating from the United States?
I have no problems with having a referendum. I think that that's one of the things of being in a constitutional republic. We live in a representative democracy, and the people should be allowed to vote on these key issues and matters. We have referendums on many other different types of issues, and I think this is an issue that, without a doubt, has been introduced to the Texas legislature. So allow people to vote on it.
One of the Republican Party of Texas legislative priorities is school choice. In light of the new proposed federal laws that would severely limit the effectiveness of school choice by mandating certain things be included in the curriculum of even private schools and homeschooling, what measures are available to parents to counter these actions?
Well, first and foremost, you're talking to a product of school choice. My parents decided to send me to a small Black Catholic private school in my neighborhood, the old Fourth Ward in Atlanta, instead of two public schools, C.W. Hill and John Pope. And so I believe in school choice, and we made the same decisions for our two daughters. And so when I look at what is going on with school choice, I want to take a step back and talk about the importance of municipal level elections, especially school board, because the left is going in and taking more and more control of school boards. Look at what is happening at the Leander Independent School District, where under the guise of teaching literature, they're basically having our children read pornography. We don't want that happening in our school system. So I think that, again, education is a state and below that level responsibility. It is not a federal government responsibility. And the federal government should not be dictating policy when it comes to education. We used to have health, education, and welfare as a government agency, but the Carter administration split them out into three and created the Department of Education, all because the teachers unions wanted that to happen. We have teachers unions that are dictating education policy in the United States of America and shouldn't be. Parents should be dictating, and parents should be the ones involved in the curriculum and education policy in their local independent school districts and areas, and definitely at the state level. So I think that's what we need to do. Once again, reassert the 10th Amendment. This is not an enumerated power to the federal government. It's a power that is reserved to the states and to the people.
Many of the Digital Warriors USA members have expressed concerns to our national leader, Steve Sargent, about the large number of people moving to Texas from liberal states such as New York and California. Is the Republican Party of Texas studying the political leanings of these new residents?
Well, there are two different categories of people that are moving. You have the individuals that are living in California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and they're fed up with the policies of those failed blue states. And they're voting on our side. There's no doubt about it. I meet them all the time. And what they're really saying is they want Texas to stand up and be a strong red state. But then on the other side, you have a category of people that have been uprooted because you have these major corporations and businesses that are signed to leave California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and they're coming here to the states of Texas, Georgia, I mean, you name it, these strong red states. And so what we have seen is, if you look at, let's say, a State Farm or Toyota North America, some of these others that have moved here, you take about a 30-mile radius around that corporate headquarters and just look at some of the trends in the precincts that are around there, because most people 30-mile commute, that's normal. And what you'll see happening is that previous to that corporation or business moving in, those precincts were pretty strong red. And then all of a sudden they start to trend purple, and some precincts have trended to blue. So I think the important thing that we need to do is talk to these corporate and business CEOs that are moving their corporations here and say, explain to your employees that are coming with you why you made the decision to leave California, to leave Illinois, to leave New York, to leave New Jersey, because they've got to understand if they come here and they screw up the state of Texas, where are you going to move your business to next? And so that's what we have to start articulating.
Let's talk briefly about the Texas GOP and Gab. The Republican Party of Texas recently removed its account from the Gab free speech platform. What prompted this action?
You have to talk to the 35 members of the state Republican Executive Committee that decided they did not want us to be on Gab, which is a conservative platform. It was founded by a Christian conservative, and you have hundreds of thousands of individuals from the state of Texas that are on that platform, Gab. Now, what Gab is a true free speech platform. And so it does not censor anyone's comments below a story, whatever. And so there are some people that believe that the Republican Party of Texas, by posting our message on Gab, we were supporting the comments that were down there. Now, any individual can go in and remove the comments, but overall, I mean, you're not able to go and hide all the comments. You have to do that yourself. So it's a true free speech platform. Obviously, there were some people that tried to associate it with anti-Semitism. And I just think they were grossly misinformed and not educated on what Gab is. And if you really are concerned about these social media platforms, there's a lot of horrible stuff that's out there on Facebook or on Twitter. And those are controlled by leftists. And so if we are going to go out there and undermine a constitutional conservative platform, that doesn't speak very good for us, or well, those 35 individuals that voted for us to be removed from Gab. But I have a personal account on Gab, and I'm pretty happy to be there.
So will you tell us what your username is on Gab so our listeners can join you there?
Oh, shoot. I mean, just add Alan West. I'm pretty simple, pretty easy.
Okay, good deal. Well, Colonel West, Alan, I greatly appreciate your time today. And I would like to leave you a few minutes to address any comments that I haven't covered with the questions that you'd like to share with Digital Warriors USA and the Republican Party nationwide as well. But I will throw one more question at you. I've broached this to you at meetings we've met at 2 different times, and you kind of skirted the issue. Have you made any decisions yet about any political aspirations for the future?
Oh, you're so wrong. You know, look, right now, and I'll close on this thought. My focus is on our legislative priorities, those 8 priorities of the Republican Party of Texas and this legislative session. I mean, we're less than 2 months from the session being over. And we've got to get election integrity passed, monument protection, religious liberty and freedom, constitutional carry, ending the abortion, ending child gender modification, school choice, and ending taxpayer lobbying. We've got to get that passed here in this legislative session because that's what the grassroots people want. And then after the session ends, May the 31st, I tell you, VJ, I will pray. I will have the discussions with my wife and my daughters as to what the future holds, because I will always be a servant to God, country, and Texas.
Well, you can count on the fact that the Willises, the Conservative Parlor, and Digital Warriors USA will be praying with you about that.
Thanks. Thanks so very much for having me, BJ.
Thank you for being here.